Welcome, everyone. My name is Luba Vangelova. I am the founder of the Hub co-learning community, and I will be talking today with Monica Cochran, who we have courtesy of the organizing done by Catherine Fraze of the 100 Roads Network. And we are doing this in a little bit of a different format. We will have some other people joining us who will be able to also ask questions, but I'll go ahead and start. I have some prearranged questions for Monica. And just briefly, Monica she runs an organization called Learning Without Borders. She is a coach, mentor, professional education consultant, but I will let you say a little bit more about your background just in brief and what you do now.
Okay, well, thank you very much. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I really appreciate Kath for organizing it and for you for being willing to interview, because I really do not like talking to blank screens. And when we talk a little bit about the polyvagal theory, you'll know why I don't like it very much. So at any rate, I'm Monica Cochran, and I've been an educator for over 40 years now. So I've had a chance to be an alternative education regular. I've worked in business. I've worked in hospitals, nonprofits. And so what I've learned over the years is that a relationship and helping people learn in ways that work for them is really, really important. So I've had a chance to be a coach. I've had a chance to train teachers. And now in this other phase of my life, I get to work with people all over the world. I ran an organization called Self Design Global, and we had learners there. And now I have private clients all over the world, and we get to help them learn in the ways that work for them.
Okay. And so today we'll be talking specifically about trauma. Trauma impacts people's states of mind and their ability to learn and how to get past the ill effects of this. So, um, is, and Monica has done a lot of studies in this area, particularly, and brain, I guess, neurology and
Yeah.
how all that works. So let's just first kind of set the context here and why we're talking about this now, why it seemed particularly timely. Um, I mean, I think probably no one would dispute that a lot of people have been feeling quite traumatized over the last year from this, that, and the other. It's kind of a multi-front assault in some ways on our kind of ability to function. So how would you characterize the energy that you're feeling among people now, and how did it kind of progress over the last year?
Well, it's really interesting because, people say I'm really, really stressed. And and we've all dealt with stress. It's not anything new. But I've also studied the work of Dr. Bruce Perry, and I have personal as well as professional experience with trauma. And when stress is predictable and I have some control over it, then it actually can help me develop resilience, right? But when the stressors are coming from all different arenas and I don't have that feeling that I can navigate it, then it really makes sensitizes me to it. And I have a quick slide here if I can share my screen real quick. This is a really good visual. I think it helps us understand. Okay, so right now, usually, this is our home. This is, everything, one place that we can have some safety. And right now, we have economic insecurity, we have food scarcity, we have COVID, the environment is, so we've got stressors coming from everywhere. And so consequently, it puts our body into either a state of fight or flight, sympathetic reaction, or it puts our body into, I can't do anything, it's hopeless, right? And we call that dorsal vagal, and I'm going to explain that a little bit. But part of it is because we are hardwired here to have a negativity bias. That's how we've survived. We would not be here today if we didn't have that. But consequently, we need at least 3 positive interactions for every negative one, just for homeostasis, right? Yeah. Okay. And so that's really the key thing there, is that we really want to be able to We want to thrive. We don't want to just survive this, whatever's going on. So we actually need 5. So this is just where we stay even. But if we want, we need 5. So that means we actually have to be able to look for more positive things. Does
Mhm.
that answer your question a little bit?
How would you characterize where the preponderance of people are right now, energy wise? I mean, what are you hearing from parents, from educators, from young people? What is the kind of state of mind, if one can generalize it?
I think it depends where you were when you came in. Okay. And that kind of goes back to Dr. Porges's polyvagal theory. And where is your home away from home? So he's got his hierarchy. There's a hierarchy, and the hierarchy is when I'm safe and I'm connected. It's what we call ventral vagal. And this is physiological, and I can show you guys a photo. It's basically from our vagus nerve.
Can you explain what the vagus nerve is
Yeah.
first for those who are not familiar with it?
This is the vagus nerve, and it is the longest nerve in our body. It goes through every organ. It goes all the way down to the colon, from our brain stem down to the colon. But the interesting thing about it is that 80% of the information goes from the body to the brain, not from the brain to the body. So we can't. So when we don't pay attention to what's happening physiologically in our body is already reacting. And there's 3 different states that we can be in. And this is Dr. Porges' polyvagal theory. We're either safe and socially engaged, we have a sympathetic activation, and we have the dorsal vagal active. We're numb, collapsed, and shut down. So it's not necessarily what's happening that causes the trauma, it's our reaction to what's happening or whatever violation of a previous arrangement we had.
Okay, and so it's not what happens that causes trauma, it's our reactions to it. So um, can you then explain how you've seen people react to the various traumas that have been collectively as a society experienced, or as a community, as a group of communities experienced over the last year? Has there been kind of a progression?
Well, again, there's the big T's, okay, because some people are having economic insecurity, right? They're having food scarcity. They're, so that's the big T. And then there's a lot of what we call small T's. Our normal rhythms of life have been interrupted. Okay, so and so you have to. So when we're looking at all the things that have happened, I showed you the slide. It all depends where you were coming into this. So the more vulnerable that you were before, you're even more vulnerable now, unless you can find yourself ways to mitigate what's going on. And Dr. Porges, the polyvagal theory has 3 components. One is this hierarchy. We have co-regulation and we have neuroception. So when we have neuroception is the one I first came in contact with many, many years ago. And that is our body's, I call it our own TSA agent, for better or worse. Okay. It's the part of our body that's always keeping track of what's going on. Okay. So what happens when this goes offline and we're not able to do this, then this is what comes out. This is our TSA agent, and it's subconsciously trying to keep us safe. So it keeps us safe by getting into one of these states. So if everything's going fine, then you and I can have this conversation. Just now, I went into a bit of fight and flight. Okay, this isn't working the way I expected to work, right? So my heart's beating a little faster now. And I need to take a few breaths so that I can get into a state where you and I can keep talking and I can go forward. If I was not okay at all, I might go further down and I might say, hey, I can't do anything here. I'm just going to give up. I'm going to turn this thing off. I can't make this work. And that's what happens when we go into that bottom state of what we call dorsal vagal. And you ask, where is somebody? If I was already feeling things were hopeless, as Dr. Porges says, it's going to be very, very challenging for me. And sometimes we want people to go from that bottom state. I want you to go back and be happy. So we try and cajole them into being happy again or being regulated. and it just doesn't happen. They have to keep going back up. I have to have some movement. I have to have some energy. So sometimes that's where we see that anger coming out, right? We see that mobilization. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question a little bit?
Because what I've been hearing from a lot of people is words like apathetic, stressed, depressed, just having to force myself to do the most basic things that, except for what has to get done today. I mean, so what I'm trying to get at is, would you say that that is something that is quite widespread, from your kind of perception? And if so, how do you explain those feelings?
Okay. And as we mentioned, when I don't feel I can make a difference, right? When I'm not able to, I don't have my rhythms of the day, I often will go into sympathetic, but then I burn out, right? Because your body just can't keep going in overdrive. So if you don't have a way to get back into a resourceful state, you are going to drop into what they call dorsal vagal. And this is our most primitive part of our vagus nerve. It's from phylogenetically when we were reptiles. If you look at a turtle and it gets afraid, it pulls back into its shell. Okay. If you see that little mouse that gets stuck in the cat's, that little mouse that gets stuck in the cat's mouth, it feigns death, right? Some people see blood and they have syncope, they collapse. And that's what's happening to people. That it's actually, I don't have any of my routines. I don't have any of the things that I usually use to get myself back into a resourceful state.
Mhm.
So therefore they go into this other collapse. And that's basically what's been happening, because the things that people have used, we were just having a conversation. If I can't go to my sporting event and go watch my favorite team, meet up with my buddies, right? Go and socialize. Those are all the things that we've used. And so what's happened with COVID is that we want social engagement. We want that connection, right? And so we're being told, no, you can't have that because that's not safe. So it's created this difficulty in our nervous system, that the thing that I crave the most, touch, being with other people, now you're telling me I have to not have that. And all of my routines. So I actually am having decision fatigue. I have to make decisions all day long, where before I had these rhythms, I had these routines, things I could count on in my day. So when I talk with people who have kids and they can't learn, I said, we have to make sure your bookends are there. Is your day getting off to a good start? Is it ending on a good note? How's the rest of your day going? You ask kids about school, lunch and recess, right? They know when lunch is, they know when recess is. I just am working with a young man, and he says, he realized I'm not working. I can't get my day organized. I have to get up. When I have to go to work, I get up, I take a shower, take care of business, take a shower, shave, and I go to work.
Mhm.
And so when you take all those things away, people are like, I don't know how to organize myself.
Mhm. So is that sort of a transitory thing, and then people adapt, and like what happens if people are at the bottom of the ladder? I mean, they're not presumably stuck there forever. So
No, no. And I think the thing that we're always looking at, we're looking for top-down strategies, right? And what we're finding with Dr. Porges, and I love this one because this is really what I talk about with kids, and I use it the opposite way. But when we're happy and we're in social engagement, this is joy, learning. When we're fighting, we have fear, panic, rage, and then we have shame, depression, detached, and shut down. So the way to get back here is to get back some of that emotion. We keep wanting to take emotion out of everything, and we've got to put some emotion back in. I have to have some emotion. So truly, having some irritation, having some anger, that's okay. At least I have some emotion. Now, obviously, it'd be better if it was a little more joy and learning. But so when I say people need to get moving, they do need to move. They have to move their body. So
mm,
movement is one of the ways that we go from freeze Breath is huge.
Mhm.
Breathing out is huge.
Okay. And um, and then specifically, how is it affecting the ability to learn, both of adults and of young people, to be in the state that a lot of people are in?
Okay. Well, that brings us back to that third state. We talked about the hierarchy. We talked about that neuroception, but there's something else called co-regulation. And then we're asking people to do this by themselves. And really what we need is co-regulation. We need those two, the mom and the little girl and the dad and the little boy. We have to help each other co-regulate. And that's a piece we, in our society, we want everyone to be able to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. And that's not likely to happen. So this concept of co-regulation is huge.
Mhm.
And so we right now in our education system and learning, we figure we have a little bit of a mechanistic kind of viewpoint. Dr. Porges often says, we think our students, our learners are little machines. And if the environment is good for one machine, it should be good for all the machines. And so there's three pieces to co-regulation. Inside, I have to be regulated in my own body, and outside the environment, and then between people. And actually, the between people is the most important because I can mitigate a lot of the other situations. In fact, one of the highest praise I've ever gotten from any of the kids I've worked with is she says, Monica, you make me feel safe enough I can even learn math. And she has dyscalculia, right?
Mm.
So that level of safety you have to have. You cannot be, it's a prerequisite. Feeling safe is a prerequisite to have creative thinking, right? It's a prerequisite for problem solving. It's a prerequisite for us to navigate through life in a way. So this thing of how do we help people we have to create enough safety for them to come out of their shell.
Mhm.
I'm not going to get my turtle to come out by banging on his shell. Right. He's not coming out. We have had a turtle for 40 years, not 40, almost that long. We had it with one of our kids. Yeah, we've had this turtle and she's not going to come out of the shell. She comes out of the shell when I pour some nice warm water on her. I give her food, right? I make her environment. I put her little heating pad on, and she comes out. And we do
And
the same.
so, how do people help each other co-regulate if they're all in the same state and coming from the same kind of place, and no one feels like they have any excess capacity to, you know, that they can barely help themselves, let alone, help each other to co-regulate and so on? How do people get unstuck from that? Do you need some kind of energy to come from outside the family, outside the system, outside somehow?
That's a really good question. And the words I heard that bring to mind everyone, no one, that for me, as soon as I start hearing myself say that, I know I'm not in a good place. Because whenever I use everyone, no one, and this is not indicative of you, we all do it. I say I always, I never, those are little like trigger words that I ask myself, everyone? Really? There's no one that can help? And I have to really question it. Nobody can help me. And the way I found my way out of it is to go help somebody else, even in a small way. Right. So when my kids are in that situation, we've had some really difficult times in our lives. Um, and I'll share the most difficult one. And it wasn't because I did it so well. My son was in a horrible car accident, and we're walking from the ER up to the ICU. And it's Christmas time. And outside the Christmas thing, the lights are out. And my husband turns to me and says, oh, look at those beautiful lights. And I spun on him and I said, like, what the heck? Our kid's up in ICU. How can you be looking at lights? And he goes, Monica, those lights are going to be there whether we see them or not. Right. So we do have to look for beauty. And we found nature is a big one. Nature and beauty. It's maybe it's not so coined. We look for the light. We do. So I mean, that's my personal old example that I wasn't looking for beauty because I was too caught up in how awful this situation was, and this was still awful. Wasn't like it was all better when we got up there. But the idea that, and when my kids we were having a tough time, I did have them go over to the homeless shelter, and my daughter said, "Mom, these folks are just like us." I go, "Yep, they are, and it could happen to anybody." right? Moving over. So I think we have to look for community. We have to look for those small spots where we can make a difference. Pets are great. When I work with kids on the spectrum, they I get along better with my dog than my family. No kidding. Yeah, because then you get that unconditional acceptance, right? Your dog loves you no matter what. I don't know if that helps a lot, but it's looking for those little things. I think I have a slide here. This is what's happening in our brain when we're activated. Our prefrontal cortex shuts down, so we have to look for the bottom up strategies. So the answer is you experience the stress, you recover, and then you look for that little pause after you recover to reflect. Like I didn't have this great insight about my husband in that night. I still thought he was crazy for looking at the lights, right? It wasn't until we were through the situation. So these are the bottom up strategies. You're asking, what do?
Mhm.
We breathe in and we take a long exhale. Even putting your hand over your heart and your hand here, it just gets the connection from your heart to your
Hmm.
face. So this 10th cranial nerve controls all of the nerves in our face. So we look to see, does his eyes look droopy? Does he have a smile? And are you seeing some crinkles around? No, you obviously see a lot around my eyes, but the crinkles, right? This is what we want to be seeing. Rhythmic music will do it, right? So we want people, when I'm talking on Zoom, I'm getting close to the camera, right? And I'm making sure when I'm working with kids, especially, I'm present. See, we used to look at this two-dimensional screen as a way to be entertained and a way to get information. And now we've got to use it as a way to connect. And that's what we're missing in education. They're trying to deliver direct instruction to a group. You're not going to deliver without them interacting, because this is what we need to do. Even chewing gum, singing, humming, these are all the bottom up
Hmm.
strategies that help our body calm down enough that we can turn on our prefrontal cortex again.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
that
Um,
helps. Oh no.
yeah. Um, and so um, basically, some things you had said in a previous conversation, I think might be good to go into also. You had said that when the prefrontal cortex part of the brain is not activated, when people are in kind of a lower level of that ladder, that I think what you said is that it leads to a lot of black and white thinking,
Mhm.
to not being able to even kind of consider new options, weigh things, and so on. Could you talk a little bit about the different ways that the prefrontal cortex kind of manifests, if it's not being activated?
Okay, so what's happening here is you look this when that red part of our brain is going, we're in the limbic system, that's what we need. Like if a snake is coming, I don't want to ponder whether it's going to hurt me or not. I want to move fast, right? So that's that red limbic system. But it's going to be black or white. I either move or I don't move,
Mm,
right? So when we're reacting there, it is black and white. I
mhm,
don't want to be pondering. I don't want to be thinking. This
mhm,
isn't the time for possibility thinking. But
mhm,
that green part, that's our prefrontal cortex, is our cortex, but the front part, particularly behind our brain, behind our forehead, this part right here, this is our thinking part. And when we flip our lid or we're in this other state, we can't access that. So we will get into, just tell me yes or no.
mm,
Oh, wait a minute. Whoa, whoa, whoa. There's a lot of gray here, but we can't even contemplate the gray
mhm,
because we're just too, we're in fight or flight. And if we get down to the bottom, that bottom part there, the bottom red, that's that dorsal. That's where our vagus nerve is. And so we really do want that to be gray so that it's calm and we can think. So
mhm,
that's really important. So because once we can do that, then I have something here on some top down. Once we can do that, we can use some what we call top down strategies. The top down strategies are where we can get curious. We can begin to look at somebody else's perspective. We can take control. Like, when we've been going through COVID, people say, well, you need to be planning your Zoom lunches together. You need to be engaging in that. Oops, I almost got there. So, see, this is that thinking part right here, right? I can plan, I can monitor. I can put some effort in. I can emotionally regulate. And you need to be able to do that. For me to get curious about you, I can't be in that fight and flight stage because I'm in survival, right? So it's hard to plan when you're in that state.
Mhm.
So we can connect with family and friends. We can create the predictable routines. We can partner with people who have strengths we don't have. We can tend and befriend, is what I was doing. We can be intentional. Those are the top down strategies that help us get through these kind of difficult situations. But what I was saying is when we have that survival response, we can't use any of these. So that's why you have to start bottom up, help someone get to a place where they at least trust you enough that they're going to be willing to let you come in and help them do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So what if someone is operating at a lower level, but it's time to make some decision, some important decisions, but they're operating at that kind of lower functioning level, black and white thinking or whatever. And they don't have the time or space to, try these strategies to kind of get back at a kind of better place on the ladder to be able to weigh different options and make good decisions. What then? Any kind of smaller steps they can take in the moment to kind of make sure that they don't make decisions that may have long-term negative impacts?
Yeah. Taking a breath, waiting. I think the having another person um, hold space for that person to say it out loud and validate their feelings, like,
Mm,
you know notice their face and validate what they're feeling. And then what I found a strategy as an educator and consultant is I write down what they're saying.
mhm,
And I like when we can be in person to be kitty corner, you know so that we're not. But I'll say let's share a whiteboard and write down all the things that are coming up here, and then make sure I'm highlighting the things that are really coming up. And I'm doing a group right now, and we're doing something called a transformation popper, which I've done as a mind map before. But we start talking about what kind of things do you like to do, what kind of things do you don't, who do you like to do it with, and we begin with where they are. So this, I guess, the main answer to that, Luba, is I've got to meet the person where they are, and then I've got to create what Vygotsky would call a zone of proximal development, help them get to that next step.
mhm,
Right. So you can sometimes, even when I'm not feeling well, I can do it for somebody else. That's the interesting piece. When I might not be able to do it for myself, but if I can step back a little bit, I can still help other people.
mhm,
And so then hopefully other people can help me.
mm,
And that's when um, a circle or a group can help each other, because the wisdom is really in the middle.
mm,
People all bring their experience to it. It's not a therapy group, but it's a group that says, "Hey, I believe in you, and we can work and make this happen." And that's the value of community. And that's
mhm,
another piece
mhm,
that if people can find even glimmers. And this is Deb Damers. We can't go from being down here to up here. So every day you want to look for the glimmers. You want to look for those moments, and sometimes you just have to notice them, and then you can begin savoring them. So you can't just make those big jumps.
mm, mhm, mhm. Okay. Um, and so it sounds like what one friend of mine was explaining as a spiral,
Mhm.
where you're kind of just getting yourself not kind of in a linear way out of a hole, but kind of in a spiral that it's kind of a virtuous circle going upward, taking little steps that then give you energy to take bigger steps and so on. Is would you?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I also say that the idea of this, that's why I don't really like a ladder. I kind of like it this way, right? Where, I have different places, because then I can come back to midpoint, right? If
Mhm,
I'm way over here, I can come back to midpoint. I can go here. But I love Deb Damon's work, and almost everything's on a hierarchy. However, I think the piece is once we know that we can move from state to state all day and we begin noticing our movement, then we don't get stuck.
Mm,
Now we've had enough experience back up and down or left and right that we can begin to navigate ourselves back. That's what things like meditation practices and mindfulness do.
mhm,
Exercise routines, they help us get back in center so
mhm,
that when we go out there, and obviously having a partner or somebody else. I do a lot of work with strength-based learning. So I work with learners and their parents on their strengths,
mhm,
right? And then I don't have all the strengths, but I have mine are input, learner, ideation, connectedness, and individualization. So that fits the work I do.
mhm,
But I often will regulate with ideas,
mhm,
right? Because I'm comfortable there. I can, I can really get into that. But the piece of it is that my husband has focus. He has some other ones that I don't, right? So I get all the ideas. We play with guys, and he's okay. It's now time. We have to make a decision, Mom. So partnering with somebody who has strengths that you don't have. It's just that when you're not regulated, it's hard to use your strengths. So you can't, it's why it's so hard to have two parents flipping their lid at the same time for
mhm.
kids, right? You need someone to say exit stage left so that somebody can help.
Okay, so basically, in terms of main takeaways for parents that are kind of feeling overwhelmed and stuck kind of at the lower level functioning themselves, what would be your main kind of, let's say, three things they can start doing either today, this week, or whatever to at least start the journey to get themselves and their children kind of in a better place where they're able to learn better, to make better decisions, better executive functioning.
I think the first one would be to take care of yourself, right? You've got to get grounded. There's a lovely, if anybody you've had TED, there's a TED talk called Neuroception by Claire Wilson. There's a book if you're a reader called Grounded. The best thing you can do is ground yourself. Because when I'm grounded, I'm giving off grounded messages to my kids.
Mm,
Little kids can sense it, they know right away. Dogs can sense when we're not okay, right? So it's really important for us to be grounded. So if it's listening to music that helps you get grounded, and then you're also modeling that for your children. So that's number one. The second thing you do is you have to start noticing what's good about your kids. What do they do well? And you start there because learning is happening all the time. It's not just happening when somebody's teaching, right? We think that because that's what we've been conditioned. That's a whole nother topic, but that's what we think that learnings only happen when somebody's teaching. Learning's happening all the time. So even, well, no. So that would be the second thing. And I guess the third thing, if you have teenagers or people who are pretty resistant, is go watch them when they're asleep, your children, because that's when you're going to remember. You're going to get that feeling that you need, when they're really big and their feet are smelly and they're kind of sarcastic and they're eating you out of house and home. You go in and you see that boy laying in that bed, all sprawled out. You remember them when they were vulnerable and little. So those, and I would get out in nature, number 4, if you can, someplace, even if it's just looking out the window in the sun, we know that's really helpful.
mhm,
And like I said, these are small things, and I know that these small things help you to do the big things,
mm, mhm.
right?
Okay.
Taking care of yourself is probably the key thing.
Okay.
I hope
Uh,
that helps.
yeah. And why don't we open it up to any other questions from the other people who are tuned in? Does anyone have any questions?
I probably scared them all away with my flipping around on my trackpad there.
I think this is really relevant, timely stuff that I'm so glad that I tuned in today. And I would love to see your whole presentation, actually, Monica, even though it wasn't meant to be for today, but we will maybe find another opportunity to do that.
We can do
And
that, yeah.
yeah, and the last question was perfect. So what was the name of that? I mean, the last comment about what a parent can do, because I'm experiencing this right now daily. So there was something you said, Claire Wilson TED Talk about grounding. Is that what it was?
It's called neuroception. And
Neuro. Okay, neuroception. Okay.
that's the term that Stephen Porges coined back in '94. I didn't run across it till like 2005. But it's that inner sense we have of whether I'm safe or not.
Okay.
You know, and that neuroception is about a 14-minute. And I think you're in the community, so I can see if we put this. I'll put the link under this when we get it up or something, because that's what. And if you like to read it, you can't really get the physical book, but it's a Kindle book.
Okay.
Called Grounded. It's a short read. It's really lovely, and it's all about us getting grounded so we can help the kids.
Sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome, Jill. Anyone else? Angie, do you have any thoughts, questions? I know Joe's there too.
No, I think we're good. You and I have talked about this at length, so I really appreciate it, though. This was great.
Yeah.
And so I do have one other question. So would you say that basically it doesn't therefore even matter what's happening kind of on the macro level all around you? Like, you know, if society's kind of imploding, if institutions are, you know, being reshaped, collapsing, whatever, you know, if the pace of change is kind of breakneck, you know, if we're in a fourth turning and everything's just changing faster, you know, there's this expression that sometimes nothing happens for, you know, a decade, and then sometimes a decade happens in a day or a week. And I think we're living through one of those times.
Yeah.
So would you say that it almost doesn't matter what's happening on the macro scale, because like you were saying, it's your response to it that matters? So, I mean, can people actually equip themselves to get through any kind of level of chaos that's happening at the bigger scale? Because we, you know, there are many indications that we may not be out of the woods, that there are a lot of other upheavals kind of waiting in the wings to kind of build on the upheavals that we've been going through for the last year, that was just the second inning, you know. So
I'm not going to try and change my screen here because it probably makes me dizzy, but my biggest word is resilience.
Okay.
You know, it is the ability to navigate through difficult times. And that usually is not external, because if we're relying on these, and I totally believe we need safety nets in our society and all those kind of things, but at the end of the day, I have to be with myself and the people in, you know, around. So the safer I can be, then I become a safe person for other people. And then then it allows us to be able to have what I call higher thinking, because today wasn't about what's in my head getting into your head. It was in this conversation that we hopefully sparked some thinking. So it's not me having the answers so much as hopefully what I presented today to you helped you spark some thinking in and I think it's the thinking together that we're going to get to a higher level. Kath, you just unmuted. Do you have a thought or a question or something to add?
You know, I think it is very, very helpful. And this practical advice of just going and watching your child and reconnecting and seeing them as a whole, the whole of who they are, and not just, you know, struggles that they're going through right now. And then, you know, maybe it's just doing those little things that can get you a little bit closer to the middle. Not trying to do everything at once, and just being kind to yourself, because, you know, also remember that, you know, children go through phases, and like sometimes it's more, and then you know, it's worse at sometimes, and then I just think there's a lot of hope in that we can do all these little things, and all those things are going to add up to making them feel you know, feel more socially engaged and in a better place.
Yeah, and it is the sum of it's the synergism. I think that's what your friend was talking about. You know, there's a synergism that goes on, and we grow, and then we need to consolidate, and then we need to grow some more, and we consolidate, and it's not always this linear progression. And I think you know the stories. I had a tough childhood, but I know my parents loved me, right? We didn't have a lot of money, but we all cared about each other. You know, there's you hear these stories, and that's the story of that family, or there's, it might not be their parent, it could be an aunt or a grandmother, but we know that kids can get through very difficult situations, trauma, big T's, okay, if there's one other person they feel that cares about them.
Right.
So that's the story. That's Bruce Perry will tell you. So somebody who holds space for somebody else helps them get through that difficult thing. And then for me, there's been a lot of people, as we've been through some challenging time. Now I pay it forward. That's, when you begin paying it forward, then you've created a new thought process, right? So I'm not looking to pay back the people, and I don't want anyone to pay me back for what I've done. Just go out and help somebody else, right? Because that's how the world's going to get better.
Right. I can see like making little rituals in your family for that connectedness, just little small things could make a difference, right?
When I worked with families that had people deployed, or you need a leaving ritual, you need a coming back ritual. When people travel and they work away from families, I go, you need a leaving ritual for mom or dad, and you need a coming home ritual. You need a way for them to get back into your family. So, when my husband had to travel for a while, Friday night, we had pizza and a movie, right? Everybody, we were together and we were enjoying it. And it was, and even the lively discussion over which one we were going to watch, right? So all of those little rituals, my husband used to do animals with my daughter in the morning. These are little rituals you have. Tucking in bed at night, not giving up those little bits, savoring a cup of coffee with a good friend, even if it's on FaceTime, right? It's just, and when don't come way back here and have that conversation, right? Just like you would if you were sitting and having coffee, you'd be sitting close together, right? And you'd be holding your cup, and you'd be having that conversation and you'd be listening to them. So all the things that you do, what you would do in regular conversation, we want to do in this time of social distancing too. I hope that.
Yeah.
I geek out on this, but I tried not to geek out. I really love to geek out on polyvagal theory, but I know that in 45 minutes, that's not really useful. So.
All right. Does anyone else have any questions, comments before we wrap up?
One more. What was that thing about the bookends again? The morning routines, when you just started talking about routines?
Yeah, like I mentioned, it helps if you have your own bookends of the day. Here's what I do at the beginning. Here's what I do at the end. Here's what I do with my kids. Like for years and years, my husband did animals, stuffed animal voices with my daughter, because I'm not a morning person. Just let me have my coffee. So it was helpful. There was a bookend for her, right? And by the time he did that, I could help get breakfast organized and stuff. So, and then the end of the day, we had, 2 songs and a story, right? So whatever they are, mine right now, I read. I can, even if it's just a paragraph, I read for 15 minutes before bed, and nothing exciting, nothing, it's nice, something to help me go to sleep. So these little things help you have some predictability, and having something at the end of the day where you say, gee, what was something good that happened? What was we call it the rose, the bud, and the thorn sometime, or two stars and a wish, two good things that happened today, something you wish would have gone better. All those little things. It doesn't matter what they are, Jill, just that they happen, with regularity. Hope that was helpful.
Yeah. All right.
It's harder with teenagers. I will tell you, it's much harder because they stay up much later. Remember, they have the ability to outstay us. So my rituals when my kids were that age were when I went to bed. We're connecting at the end of the day here. And of course, they always had their crisis after I was already in bed, just so you know.
All right. Well, thank you, Monica. Hopefully this was useful to everyone watching, and good luck, everyone.
And like I said, I hope it works. I mean, I am in Workspace Sky and in 100 Roads. So if I can help in any way, feel free to reach out. And I will put when we get this up, I will put some links down there too. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica.